Well, the Lightning Trapper has always been the go-to standard, and the Blade Sentinel Trapper has been the sleeping giant since 2.4, despite only getting attention recently. The real winner in the last two patches has been the Fire Trapper, going from a build that can generally only be competitive up to mid-Nightmare, even with high-end gear, to one that with the right gear competes even with builds like the Hydra Sorceress in Hell. This is mainly due to the changes in 2.6 that allowed for the resistance piercing to work on traps, which also gave the assassin a reason to use Sunder Charms as well, though it is also a build that gets a boost in 2.7 thanks to next hit delay, due to how it functions with Wake of Fire. Since without that next hit delay interrupting damage, this area of effect skill can now show its full force not only against crowds, but more importantly against bosses, provided it can hit them. This change actually influences the build all the way into normal, taking this already solid starter build and making it significantly more capable of dealing with bosses even with the usual starter gear of the basic generic startup, which was one of its more notable weaknesses in previous versions of the game. Speaking of starting out though, as with most mono-elemental builds, you will struggle in hell until you get at least some better equipment, so for solo self-found, pairing this with a kicker build is not a bad idea, and unlike the Lightning Trapper, the Fire Assassin does have plenty of points to spare to do this, and it has plenty of reasons to pack increased attack speed as well until they can pierce those resists. So don't be afraid to look into hybrids such as the Dragon Talon Kicker who uses the rune word black, or the Dragon Tail Kicker that uses Lawbringer, just to help you push past those immunities in hell difficulty while gearing up. After gearing up though, I tend to favor a Shadow Master for those points instead, since the extra tank and utility will not only help drastically with keeping your mercenary alive in all the chaos, but also provide a good deal of crowd control while you focus more of your resources on actual damage output. Though with free points as usual, there's a lot of variety to choose from, though you sadly don't have quite enough to run any multi-trap setups at full power at least. Regardless of the path you take, in normal you will be getting your 1-point wonder and fade by the end for resists and damage reduction, and the entirety of the rest of your points will be going into Wake of Fire and Fire Blast, like we do in the starter assassin video from ages ago. And as usual, Fire Blast will be your spam skill provided you have enough attack speed, and Wake of Fire will be your primary damage source thanks to its nice area of effect, moderate damage, and the nice ability of traps to hit things you cannot see. Your item choices will be the standard stealth armor that is pretty much the go-to of every new character, and of course a leaf staff as well that'll get you plenty of plus fire skills and greatly boost your damage, though you will probably upgrade from these if you go into any of the hybrid builds, since you will want a shield like Rhyme for resist and cannot be frozen, and a better weapon for the actual kicking as you get into Nightmare because attack speed does matter there, and you will have to keep your boots up to date. Speaking of Nightmare, you very likely have finished off or nearly finished off your two main skills, and it is time to not only start investing in the less desirable Wake of Inferno skill, both for synergies as well as for areas like Maggot Lair and Arcane Sanctuary where the area of effect of Wake of Fire doesn't work quite as well. But you will also want to work your way down to getting 1 point in Death Sentry to help with crowds of more fire-resistant enemies, since it will pack in some physical damage as it pops corpses. If you are going hybrid into a kicker, you would be getting the basics in those now as well, and as such deciding on your equipment pick based on which way you want to go. As mentioned, black if you want to go Dragon Talon, which is the better single target option, or you go Lawbringer if you go Dragon Tail, as that is the better crowd control option, or if you're going to go with Shadow and support, work your way to a Spirit Sword for plus skills, and in all three cases you want Insight on your mercenary for now for mana, with the rest of your gear oriented towards attack speed and just general survival. Moving into Hell, for solo self-found, the support setup will struggle the most. There will be plenty of situations where you're waiting for your mercenary and Shadow to finish things. But with patch 2.7, bosses are now no longer nearly as big of a struggle as they were before. The kick setups will be a bit more reliable with weak gear, though you should have your target items by now, with Nightmare Council farming being a good source of those runes. And even a handful of really solid uniques and charms are possible there as well, since Nightmare Council can get you some of the ever desirable plus skill charms relatively easily, even if they don't get desirable suffixes. As we get into our target endgame gear, the focus shifts a bit though, from heavily plus skill and increased attack speed oriented, and instead focusing on expensive but farmable gear that manipulates not only enemy resistances, but also our own damage output. And sadly, the only middle ground step that can do much would be a self-equipped obedience, which sadly is not as effective as you would hope, since it robs you of alternate damage tools and only works in polearms without giving near the bonus of Infinity for Lightning Trappers. On the Mercenary for this build, I run an Infinity on a Holy Freeze Act 2 Mercenary, and while I do run Death Sentries among other things, they are support at best due to our character's gear, and generally only used on runs like Bale or maybe in Cows where you'll almost always have a corpse between aura ticks, even with the chill effect causing more shatters. This is because we want that minus resistance from Conviction to push things further, even if it is only an extra 17%. And we want the slow from Holy Freeze to keep things in range of our traps for longer. And it is worth noting, yes, Conviction does do more than 17% against non-immunes, but against sundered enemies, it is restricted to that 17%. Now for our character, we of course have the standard partial caster gear, plus skill armor of your personal preference, though Enigma is going to be your preferred one here since we're naturally tankier than the Lightning Trapper due to our helmet choice and other equipment. And we of course want plus skills from items like Arachnid's Mesh, Stones of Jordan's, and our amulet selection. Obviously, a good caster amulet would be better than Mara's, but either will work for most of what you'll be doing. Where we start to mix stuff up will be in our helmet, which is the start of our minus fire resistance gear with Flickering Flame providing us fire plus skills and minus enemy fire resistance. Both extremely important skills for this build, and it even helps out if you're going the Dragon Tail hybrid since Tail is considered a fire skill as well. This also helps balance out the penalty from our Fire Sunder Charm, just thanks to the fire resist aura. On our shield, since we're using Infinity on the Mercenary, I actually prefer running Phoenix to keep us topped off. Yes, it uses the corpses that Death Sentry could use, but Sentry has a much faster cycle time, meaning it will get opportunities to pop enemies in crowded groups. This gives us boosted maximum resists and chunky minus fire resistance, and a strong alternative is a 4 fire facet shield, though you will need mana recovery for that. On the weapon slot, you could go Phoenix again, or even Hand of Justice, but it would be a bit redundant and not provide as much help as going with a 6-socket rainbow facet blade if possible. What I have here is a Crystal Sword one, which was for a different build. If you're going for optimal on this build, you want it in a phase blade. That will give you the best trap laying speed of any one-handed weapon choice, and we'll need it since we won't be sparing the gloves for attack speed. That's because, and you probably already guessed it, we want to go for Mage Fist, since we don't want to pass up that plus all fire skills or mana regen, and the faster cast does help us with casting speed. If you have a caster amulet, like was mentioned earlier, you'll probably reach a 12 frame teleport, but with the setup you see in this video, we do only hit 13 frames. Boots are whatever you prefer, and really depend on if you're going kicker or shadow based, or even if you just want more resist, life, or even magic find. So the usual suspects of items like water walks, war travelers, or even solid rares are just not a bad choice. So have you tried the Fire Trapper in the last couple patches, or is it a build that slipped under your radar as a starter build only? Mention it down below, and as always, be sure to drop a like if you found this helpful, and sub if you want to see more Diablo 2 builds. And be sure to click the video on screen now if you want to check out the Lightning alternative.